Hello and welcome to tonight's Get in Tune. I am Michael Gracia and I have a fun show planned for tonight. My guest, who I'll introduce in a moment, I've been following on Instagram for a little bit now, and I've just fallen in love with his work. I love when I get to see his stuff posted. I think he's a terrific artist. But first, as we all know, it is Wiz Wednesday, so let's take a quick look. Oh, it's a single panel gag this week, so let's only hold it up for 15 seconds or so. Here is today's Wiz comic. All right, that's enough of the Wiz for now. Remember, you can follow him at the Wiz Comic on Instagram or on Facebook. But now let's bring on my guest. He's a storyboard artist who has worked on some live action stuff that you guys will know. We're going to take a look at his work in a little bit, but let's first bring on and get to know Fred Gago. Hello.
Hello. Hey.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you today?
Doing good. I pronounced your last name correctly, right?
You did.
Okay, good. I'm terrible with names. Want to make sure I did it correctly. Let's see.
And is it Michael or Mike, or does it matter?
Actually, I prefer Michael, but I'm not rude if someone calls me Mike. I don't yell at them. Someone, who is this? Who's this? You're stupid. Love the strip. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So Fred, before we get into like looking at your work and just showing what you're doing, because you have nothing really to promote right now, correct? You're just a guy I found, and I was like, hey, listen, this guy's work is really good. And talking backstage, found out we know a few people in common, which is really interesting. I'm sorry, I thought something popped up. So before we're gonna tell us about your background, how you got into art, what was your influences, any specific artists or shows or whatever it was.
Sure. Well, I've been drawing for as long as I can remember. I was one of those kids. As soon as you could pick up a pencil, I was drawing. But that's because I had a couple family members who were artists. They were never like published or working, but I had my uncle who's still with us. He was a cartoonist, and he went to school in visual arts in New York and High School of Art and Design. So he was a big influence on me in my early life, and definitely encouraged me to draw. And I had a cousin who was doing the same. So I had art around me, but it was the early 80s. So I was exposed to not just like the 80s, like animation, like Saturday morning animation, but my uncle definitely put me onto like underground comics, as well as like the popular stuff like Batman and Superman and all that. But I was looking at R. Crumb. I was going to like it was before Spike and Mike was a thing, but we were going to like the animation conventions or festivals around town. Yeah. And, I saw Akira like in the theater, so my influences are all over the place. A lot of editorial stuff from the Daily News.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I loved all that stuff. But, one of my first memories is literally getting up, turning on the TV and putting on Super Friends. I was a big Batman. I'm still a big Batman.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good character. Like I was telling him, and my audience knows I was telling you backstage. So I'm not a big Batman fan. I'm more of a Bat family fan. Yes. I mean, that's what I've always loved. Actually, let me ask you, have you ever watched, because people have sent it to me, on YouTube. There's a YouTube video, and I forget who put it out, but it talks about how the real Batman is dead. Have you ever seen this YouTube video?
No.
It goes in and discusses basically the before Crisis, before that whole change in universe storylines. There was the Batman who had his daughter who became Batwoman. And it was the one where she became Huntress, I believe, in the storyline.
Okay.
And that Batman eventually died in the comics. There's a whole thing about him, I guess, they're reading like his memoirs or diaries. I don't remember the whole thing perfectly. I haven't read it yet, but I want to find the issue or like a trade where this story happens. And he basically comes out of retirement and dies coming out of retirement. But he was the original Batman before like Crisis on Infinite Earths fixed the universe.
Sure.
So the real Batman has been dead since like the late 70s or early 80s, and everybody else hasn't been the real Batman.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love that.
It's a pretty cool YouTube video. You should look it up. If I can find it, I'll send it to you.
It reminds me of a recent Superman story I got put onto that was written by Alan Moore, and I think Kurt Swan drew it, and it was kind of like Superman's last like outing, and it was basically, you know, spoiler for like a 30-year-old comic, but like he like fakes his own death at the end, you know, so they think Superman's dead, but he just takes on another identity and lives happily ever after with Lois. And,
but he gave up his powers, if I remember correctly. It's called the Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow.
Yeah. That's exactly.
Kurt Swan is my favorite Superman artist. I love anything that he's drawn. It's just perfect to me.
I recently got put onto him because I'm doodling a Superman story for my just personal gratification, and I was looking at the old school stuff because I used to like the John Byrne stuff, and I like the Ruby Spears animation from the 90s, just the art style of it anyway.
Yeah.
And you know, just doing a deep dive in Superman history, I learned about Kurt Swan, and now I'm kind of gravitating towards his style as well.
Have you ever checked out, do I have the book up here? Did I put it down? Hold on. This stuff right here, I don't know if you've ever looked at this stuff here. This is Wayne Boring. He was the artist before Kurt, and you know, when this is the I think Sunday pages from 1946 to 1949. He did like all that comic strip stuff. Yeah, it's gorgeous. But he also did like the 60s and the crazy, like,
it's beautiful
sci-fi stuff. Like there was there's this, like, what I like about his work, and it's a little, you know, people do make fun of it sometimes, but it's like when you look at Wayne's art, like Superman is never really in a lot of flying poses. It looks like he's running in the air or something. So it's things like that. It's a little, you know, I don't know if you want to call it goofier, but he had a little more cartoony style than what's it called? Kurt did. But when he left DC and went to Marvel, and I think it was Captain Marvel books he drew, some of those were amazing. Though, you know, it's like DC had this stiffness to it, and then he gets to Marvel, and it's all these dynamic Captain Marvel poses, and you know, it's pretty cool to see the difference in his work.
It's funny when you look at the two companies and like the rules they would put on artists and how they would go back and forth and be able to stretch their legs in different periods of times. You know, they'd be restrained under one house and then go somewhere else and then be unleashed, you know, and then it'd be vice versa with another artist.
Yeah, so many cool things that came out in those eras that, you know, and we won't sidetrack into this conversation because it could take the whole show. But all the stuff that we are looking at and that we're talking about in comics is what people are pulling from, specifically Marvel, for their movies for the most part today.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're Jack Kirby all the way. They almost have to be, right? Especially that first wave.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, especially if you look at Thor, you know, any of those movies except for maybe the last one, like, they did such an incredible job of just translating Jack Kirby's shape language into something that's believable and tangible. I always had a hard time with it as a kid, seeing imagining what that could look like in real life and not thinking it was goofy. And these guys, they pulled it off.
It's funny though, because I feel on some of those movies, they really said, okay, this may be a Kirby creation, but we're going to go as far away from Kirby as possible. You know, like I looked at some of those things and I'm like, oh, if only they stuck to Kirby, that movie could have been better, or this part would have been good. You know, it's a whole, I don't know. It's a whole thing. I'm a big Kirby fan, so so like if I see something and then it's not, I don't want to say strictly Kirby because I'm happy to see new stuff. I just feel it's not it could be better if it's because his stuff is what we saw, what we grew up on. It's what I want to see.
Well, he's another one that I got put onto a little bit late, or at least started appreciating later in life. I grew up loving Neil Adams in the 80s, and then in the 90s, the muscle-bound like Jim Lee's and Todd McFarlane's and stuff. And it wasn't until later that I started appreciating more. Like as I learned about animation, it's funny. As I learned about animation, cartoon modern and shape language and things like that, is where I started appreciating what Kirby was doing because of his simplicity and his dynamic poses and all that. And I think the bridge between him and the comic stuff was the Bruce Timm stuff. We were talking backstage a little bit.
Yeah.
When I first saw the Bruce Timm animated stuff in stills, I was not impressed. Like the first images, like in Wizard magazine or something, I was like, this Batman's gonna stink. And then the minute you saw it move and you realize the economy of line and all this stuff, and you're like, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. And now I have this new appreciation for the old comic book stuff.
Yeah, it's funny because when I saw those, I was super excited because I instantly saw, like, I come from a less is more theory in my drawing. When what's it called? Batman the Animated Series came out, I saw the influence quickly of like Alex Toth's Space Ghost, or even the Fleischer cartoons. Even before I knew they were part of it, I'm like, this looks like this, and this is what I love, So like when you were saying in the 90s, you were loving Jim Lee and McFarlane, and though I respect them as artists, they weren't my go-to comics. Actually, the 90s, I started exploring more indies because I was seeing what was going in the 80s. When I started collecting, it was Marvel, DC, mostly DC though. Excuse me. And then when I got into the 90s, I was like, oh, this stuff's nice. And I'm reading the X-Men because I like the X-Men. But I don't know. What is this? And I find Scud the Disposable Assassin. And then you start reading like Evan Dorkin's Milk and Cheese and all those slave labor graphic books that were coming out. And I started moving over towards those and seeing these really cartoony styles, making a comeback. You weren't really seeing, unless it was like Mad Magazine back then, you weren't looking at these in mainstream comics, you look in these cartoony styles. And then, all these, Peter Begg and Evan Dorkin and all those people coming out, and you just, and I'm total. And then and it wasn't until actually I think it was the 90s, I didn't start reading Ninja Turtles, so I missed their intro in actual comics, so.
Yeah, that one I was fortunate enough to get onto early. Even though I was pretty young, I still have my original run of Ninja Turtle books.
Oh,
yeah. They actually stood the test of time, and they're in great shape. But, I was young enough that even though I read the comics first when the cartoon came out, which does not hold up, I was ecstatic, like I was the right age for it, So when I saw them on TV, I fell over the moon. And then the movies, and then, then of course, like any property, they have their ups and downs.
Yeah, exactly.
But even now, I'm looking forward to that new movie. That
does look really nice.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. I mean, I know everyone's really influenced by the Spider-Verse stuff, and I'm all for it. Like I'm not burnt out on it at all. I love the exploration of new styles and what they can pull off with the tech. It looks so good.
Yeah, no, I look forward to that too. I like that it's got that almost, if you want to call it 2.5D look to it. It's not some parts of it don't really look 3D, but other parts and then the other parts it has that like almost, I don't want to say hand drawn feel, but it has that 2D feel to it, and I get excited for that. What's
funny is I think I'm almost certain I missed an opportunity to storyboard that thing.
Really?
Yeah. I took my current job. I'm a full-time storyboard artist at a company, and literally the week I took the job, and I was a freelancer for a decade, The week I took a full-time job, I got a call from Evan Goldberg's office, right? He's Seth Rogen's writing partner, creative partner. And they're like, hey, we like your stuff. We have this action kung fu comedy thing that we like you to work on if you're available. And I was just like, sorry, I just took this gig. It sounds like a dream. I'd love to work for Evan and Seth on anything, and the only thing that they've announced that's anything that sounds like a kung fu comedy and animation is this Ninja Turtles thing. Yeah. So, well, I'm not 100% on it. I feel like I'm about 99%. I missed the boat.
It sounds like it to me.
Yeah, but that's all right.
Yeah,
projects come and go.
Exactly. But would that have been like a dream project for you though?
Oh, kidding.
Since you brought it up, we'll come back to comics later because I'm sure you and I can just chat comics all night here. But let's talk about storyboarding because even though it does have a little bit of comic feel in there, your storytelling a little sequentially, usually a lot more than just the way the comics go. I have experienced storyboarding, not to the level that you have, so I know about it. I actually even taught storyboarding for a while. Oh. So I'm very familiar with the process. But what got you into storyboarding and what is like some of your favorite things about storyboarding?
Well, what got me into it was a bold-faced lie. I started my career out of art school as a concept artist.
Okay.
And I was doing freelance at a company here in LA called Zoic, and they do special effects they did like a lot of the CW shows, Arrow and Flash, Supergirl, all that stuff, and a ton of other shows. And one day I was wrapping up a gig, doing some concept art for something, and literally I was putting on my jacket, wrapping up, and a producer came running into the room, and he's like, Fred, before you go, do you know how to storyboard? And I wanted to keep getting paid, so I looked that producer right in the eye and said, yep. and I never did. I did it in school, but I never did it professionally. And he's like, he saw, I told him yes, and he was like, it's a real simple job. It was for a Yahoo commercial, if you remember the web browser Yahoo.
Of course.
And it was like, what's funny is he's like, it's for Yahoo and it's for Pirates of the Caribbean, like some cross promotion. And I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna get to draw pirates and all that. And literally, he was like, no, it's a flying cube over the open ocean. I just need 9 frames of a cube in different positions, and we're gonna project images of the movie on it. And it was like, okay, so I got paid another few hours to draw these 9 cubes, and they turned it into something really cool. And the next thing you know, they're like, great, if we need more storyboards, we'll let you know. And I went home and I ordered Shot by Shot by Stephen Katz, which is like the director's handbook.
Yeah.
And I crash coursed storyboarding, like all the terminology and like what I would need to know. And Zoe kept calling me for a handful of commercials, and that started snowballing into a career. Like I just migrated from concept art. That work started drying up, and more storyboard work started coming in, and I really started to enjoy it because it fit into a weird wheelhouse with me. I love concept art, but I was never the best like finisher. When it comes to concept art, conceptual art, for people that don't know, is you're the ground floor of design for characters and costumes, creatures, props, and all that stuff. And I was great at ideating things at the beginning, and take the word great with a grain of salt. But, I felt good at, I could do speed drawings and I can develop, decent illustrations. But when it came to like the finish, the polish and all that stuff, it wasn't my strongest suit. And storyboarding, all of a sudden, I didn't have to, quote unquote, finish things. I could take them to the level where I was really comfortable, and I was getting to practice storytelling. And I'm a bit of a film buff, so all of a sudden I'm getting to use all the knowledge I picked up watching movies, watching special features, appreciating that kind of stuff, and using my art in a way that actually felt a bit more rewarding, and all of a sudden I became more interested in storytelling, and I guess this leads into the second part of your question, like what is it I like about it? But all of a sudden I was wearing a director's hat for a good chunk of production. You're at the ground floor of making a thing, whether it's a show, a commercial, a video game, a movie, and you actually have a bit of influence, sometimes to the, your detriment in terms of like, depending on what field you're in. But I was in a room with a director or a producer, and literally the only thing that was done for the production was the script was written. And I'm getting to have that initial conversation about visualizing something for the first time in its entirety, not just a single aspect of it. And all of a sudden, that really like lit a fire for me. It's like, oh yeah, I can, again, it's not a comic. It's, which is like, again, at the end of the day, you need to make some beautiful art. It's got to be finished and polished and all that. I get to tell an entire story and then let a team of people, make this into, something, And that was kind of the thing I liked about concept art, was like I would design a character and then a 3D animator or 3D modeler would come, make it in 3D, an animator would come, bring it to life. And I would get a kick out of seeing the team take my little goofy drawings and turn it into this realized thing. But now it's like big picture, even if it's just a 30-second commercial, it's like, wow, I visualized, every shot of this. And, a lot of times it was accurately represented the way I drew it. So, yeah, that's what I really love about it.
That is cool to see. I mean, but yeah, so, and how long now have you been storyboarding?
Pretty close to a decade, I think. I mean, I broke into the industry in concept in 2007. Okay. My first gig was the Bionic Woman television show.
Okay, I remember watching that, the new one that came out.
Yeah. It didn't last long. It was a victim of the writer's strike that was happening then.
Yeah.
But I got to design her parts, and that was fun. And then I did stuff like that for a few years on a variety of shows and game stuff. And then, so probably around 2010, I started boarding. Okay. So I guess it's over 10 years now. I guess it's about 10 years. Yeah.
No, that's fun. Speaking of that, we're going to talk about, I saw some artwork of yours on your website. Speaking of bionics, and it was one of my favorite shows that you I guess you did your own character designs for.
Oh, is it the Bionic 6?
Yeah, Bionic 6, man. That was one of my all-time favorites.
Me too.
I'm going to get ready to show your website in a moment, but before we do, I just want to tell you just how much of a fan I am, okay?
Oh.
The $6 Million Man was one of my all-time favorite shows. I still go back and watch it on whatever streaming service I can find it on. Number one. Number two, I used to even try to find the comics that they, not the ones that Dynamite did, but the older ones. My first characters I ever created were bionic superheroes. Hold on. My first human characters. I drew a lot of animal characters. My first character was I just took Mighty Mouse and turned him into a monkey and called him Mighty Monkey. But later on, when I started drawing human characters, my first superhero I ever created, well, the first two were bionic characters. And then I remember reading somewhere that the word bionic is trademarked, that I would not legally be able to use them. And I was like 14, 15 years old when I found this out. And I was like, well, they can't have bionic powers anymore. So that's when I started learning about, you hear all this like about nanotech or whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay. So their bionics, if you will, are based on nanotech now. So I switched it up, but that was the first thing. But when Bionic 6 came out, oh my God, did I never miss an episode. And I loved all those little side stories they were trying to build with what was his name, Perceptor? He was the blind guy,
I know,
the
exactly.
blind dude, and then there was the elemental, the Native American, like all those like things. I'm like, these could be their own series or recurring characters. I was like, dude, I was so into this.
I tried to pitch a reboot. I literally tried to get it off the ground.
I will tell you this. I've never done a pitch for like a TV show. I've done it for comics.
Okay.
But one of my all-time favorite cartoons was Black Star.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I don't know if you remember Black Star.
I remember.
Yeah, it was the precursor to He-Man.
He had the robot horse, right?
No, that was Brave Star.
Oh, you're right.
Black Star was Filmation 1981, I believe, because He-Man was 83.
Okay.
And he was supposed to be, from what I understand, from what I read, he was supposed to be a black hero, but people didn't think that would sell, so they changed him to Native American.
Okay.
So he's John Blackstar, and he lands on this alien planet of Sagar, and instead of he's with the Trobbits, who are basically hobbits that live in trees, so they're the Trobbits. Anyway, he's got this whole thing. I was such a huge fan of that show that I when I was on another podcast, I was talking with Tom Ruger, who was on there. And Tom, for those who don't know in the audience, he was, he created the Animaniacs and Freakazoid and stuff like that. But, he was a big influence on Tiny Toons. He wasn't the creator, though, but he gets a lot of credit for it. Anyway, he was a writer on Black Star, and I told him this was like one of my all-time favorite cartoons. And he was like, we should talk about whatever. I lost his email. I don't know how to get in touch with him now.
An email.
I don't know. I thought I had it saved, but I might have deleted it and I didn't save it in my contacts or whatever. So I don't know. But I have a whole pitch ready of Black Star to talk to him about, ready to go. So Tom, if you're watching, you can contact me through here, and I'm excited to bring up Black Star. But anyway, that was sidetracking for a moment.
Sure.
But yeah, Bionic 6, dude. That I know so many people who would love to see that back.
I loved that show as a kid. I had all the toys. I still, every once in a while, when I want to get inspired, I throw on the opening credits on YouTube just because, like, the song still hits.
Yeah.
The animation in that 30 seconds, 1 minute, whatever it is, like, it's just still beautiful. I wanted to reboot it as a cartoon, and I was even putting together a live-action movie pitch. But I met up with the people who animated it, like the actual company still exists here in LA. But what happened was they were bought out. Well, the property was bought out by NBC Universal. Mm-hmm. And I found out once they owned it, we talked to one person there, and they're like, yeah, NBC isn't talking to anyone. They're like, they don't take solicitations, and they own everything Bionic, and forget about it. So, it's just one of those things where, like, you don't own it, and it goes the way of the dodo. But I had some fun ideas, and I was inspired by, it's funny, I was inspired by Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie and their 6 kids, or, like, because to me, it was almost their story. Like, you see Mr. and Mrs. Smith, except the real life version had adopted these, like, all these multicultural kids. And I was like, what if they got into a ski accident, became bionic, and were superheroes? It writes itself. So it was going to be like Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, and like I was doing concept art for it and all this fun stuff. And eventually, when you play with other people's toys, like you got to be prepared for that shoot and drop, and they say no thanks, leave it alone. And it's like, okay. But it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, no, that sounds like it would have been great. Let's here go to. I just want to bring up your website to show real quick here, or not quick, but we're going to take a look at this because man, you've got some beautiful work here. And before we even get to this, since we talked about Bionic 6, let's just go to the drawings. I don't want to hype it up. I think that was under your personal.
Yeah, it's under character design, I think.
Oh, under character design. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think it's
so,
at the bottom.
Down at the bottom. This I gotta say the Supernatural stuff cracked me up. I was a big Supernatural fan years ago. So this right here, is this part of it or?
Yeah, that's all it. There's some of the
I love it. Nice. Chopper. Okay, hold on. His name was Chopper, right?
Yeah.
Chopper, Glove, Madame O, and
Crunk. Yeah.
Crunk or something. Yeah. This is great. I love your designs here.
Ah, thanks.
Saying you can't finish, man. These are nice.
Well, it's funny. After I was working a full-time concept art gig, and the studio closed down. And while I was on unemployment, I went to the school that I teach at currently, the Gnomon School of Visual Effects. Mm-hmm. And I was just there portfolio building. And I took some great classes there, and I used the classes to kind of, work on some of my weaknesses. And I took this great character design class with I think Brett Bean.
Okay, I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's a pretty talented comic book and animation guy as well. And yeah, he really helped me out, getting these to cross the finish line. But yeah, I wanted to do something where it was like, they were supposed to have secret identities, but they looked exactly the same. They just had like an outfit change, So I was like, what if they were extra bionic, like the skin tone changed a little bit. They weren't so obvious. Just.
Yeah, I gotta say. Well, I was gonna ask you why'd you change the skin tone, but it makes sense. I was gonna say this guy. I'm just thinking back like '90s era. Yeah. Totally reminds me of like a '90s Bruce Campbell or something. Like seeing him as Jack.
I could see that. I can totally see it.
Oh man, this is fantastic though. I really like it.
Thank you. I would have loved to see like a teenage Ernie Reyes Jr. Play Karate 1.
Yeah.
Back in his Kino days. Even who was it? I think when I was thinking of this, I was thinking of the kid. Even though he was probably too old at the time, but I really liked the show True Blood.
Which one?
True Blood on HBO.
Yeah. I watched it. I remember.
And Sookie Stackhouse's brother. He was like the good-looking blonde dummy. I thought he would have made a great sports one.
Oh, I could totally see that. Yeah.
Wow. I would have loved to see that. And I was obviously definitely influenced by the Bruce Timm of this, and a little bit of Jendi Tartakovsky.
Yeah, you're naming like everybody I love. I mean, I speaking of Jendi, I gotta go back and restart Primal. I totally forgot what what season 1 ended. They're in season 2 now, I think, or just finished season 2 or 3. I don't even know.
3. I think the show ended on 3. Yeah.
3. Yeah, I got to go back. That is a great show.
Yeah, a good buddy of mine is the voice of Spear, Aaron LaPlante. Yeah.
Cool.
What's funny is he was my bartender here in Hollywood, and he was doing voice work, on the side until it took off, and now like he's doing it full time. But he wound up working with Jendi on a few things. Like he was doing side voices on the Transylvania movies, and then he just wound up working his way up the ladder. And now he's doing all these professional grunts.
That's great. No, that's great. That is great. I love all that stuff. All right, let's get into some of this work here that you got. Is this more of them?
Some of the ideation.
Yeah.
Playing with different ages and sizes.
Yeah.
I was thinking of making, again, being a kid of the 80s, I was still am a big Ernie Reyes Jr. fan.
Mm-hmm.
So, 8-year-old Ernie Reyes Jr. was a big
like when you were watching Sidekicks or something?
Sidekicks, Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon, like that kind of stuff. Which is another thing I did concepts for. I wanted to reboot that as well.
Yeah. Let me ask you, was Karate 1 your favorite?
Yes.
I'm just gonna say it because I feel of all the drawings, even though these are all great, I just feel the passion in them. It's the movement you got, like there especially right here. There's a fun quality to them that I just see. Like you really enjoyed this particular one specifically.
I did. You nailed me. I was a big like ninja kung fu karate guy in the 80s, like all those action movies, anything, especially, and then if they were doing kid kung fu, like I always visualized myself in those roles, and I never took martial arts a day in my life. I was
about to ask you, I actually studied until I busted my knee. Yeah, I studied a few things. The last thing I studied was Taekwondo, but I have studied also kung fu, and one of my first freelance graphic design jobs, it was for the opening of a martial arts school in a couple of towns over, and the guy couldn't afford to pay me, and I'm like, well, I need money if you're gonna. So he gave me like, I think it was 5 free. It was I believe the style was Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, and he gave me 5 free classes as payment.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I studied until I hurt my knee, and but yeah, no, I loved it. I'm very upset that I busted my knee because it was like the one exercise that I stuck with.
Sure.
And I started when I was about 8 years old. I started in Kung Fu, but I didn't last long because they started weapons within like the first 6 or 7 months.
Oh.
And I was scared of like the weapons at the time. You know, I was 8 years old and I'm like, I don't want to hold a sword or nunchucks or whatever the hell they were going to give me at the it was, I'm not going to lie. We studied a bow staff first and I was okay with that. When it got to blades, I'm like, I quit.
Yeah.
And then it took me a few years, but then I ended up in Taekwondo.
I got handy with nunchucks, just because my aunt gave me a pair of nunchucks, and I would just swing them around the house, and emulating whatever I saw from whatever movies, and I could swing them around pretty confidently without banging myself in the knee or forehead.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, no, I never got good with those. Oh wow, just. Is this for the Bionic 6 too?
Yeah, that was all Chopper iteration.
Chopper, that's what I thought, yeah.
I played with some more rockabilly iterations of him.
Really?
I feel like he had that weird, like the way he would talk, right?
Yeah.
Like he was like rubbing up a chainsaw all the time.
And I used to try to imitate their voices when I was a kid. Wouldn't do it now. But,
what's funny is I wanted to ask you: do you ever do the voices for your comic strip when you?
You mean for animations or
no? I mean,
like when I'm drawing.
No, well that too. But I meant when you post them here on the website and you just look at them for 15 seconds. Do you ever just like read them out loud and do the voice?
No, I've never done that. I am. I should read them. But I never thought about that. I've thought about animating them a little bit, giving it slight movement when I have time. But I haven't had a chance to do that yet. I'd like to, because my background actually is in 2D animation.
Oh, okay.
And it's illustration in 2D animation. It's funny. My bachelor's is from a school called Empire State College. Empire State is an independent study school. So although my degree technically says visual arts, I got to study basically whatever I wanted to meet the standards. So at one point I wanted to get better at illustration. I took life drawing classes and whatever, but usually it's more of a one-on-one kind of thing where you work independently, then you meet with your mentor. They don't give you grades, they give you credits. So like if you pay say $500 and they're supposed to give you a 4-credit class, your mentor at the end of the term will be like, oh, well, we only think you did 3 credits worth. And now what happens instead of it is now you got to pay for another credit somewhere and get another grade. And, because you need to graduate. So I actually liked it better than going to a college with grades because it forced me to work. So I got to study animation. I got to study illustration work. I got to study under Richard Rockwell for comics, who was Norman Rockwell's nephew. He worked on the Steve Canyon comic strip until Milt Kniff passed away, and then he finished the strip. He was the inker on it, and then when Milt passed away, he finished the strip and storyline for a year. Learned a lot of great stuff from him. But yeah, I got to study basically whatever. So my background's really kind of in illustration animation, and I have a master's in studio art. But what was I going to say? It's I know I just sidetracked. I went into this whole story, but yeah, no. So anyway, with the Wiz, I've wanted to get back into animation a little bit more full time for myself. Mm-hmm. But I can never leave comics. They're both like my passions. Sure. So it's so hard. And if I didn't have a day job, I could do it. Mm-hmm. But I have a day job, so I have to choose one. And comics are quicker to produce than animation is right now. So I'm trying to find the schedule so I can animate some short stories that I have.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Let's go here. Let me just go to the comments real quick. Dylan says hello.
Hello, Dylan.
And we got, I can't see the name.
JD.
Digital Arts.
I know
Fred's the
JD.
man. He had him as an instructor. So is it that you? Let me just ask you: do you teach storyboarding or anything or
Yeah.
something else? Okay.
No, I teach strictly storyboarding.
Okay.
I teach here in Hollywood at the Gnomon School of Visual Effects.
Yeah.
And I've been there about 8 years. And if you've never heard of Gnomon, Gnomon's like, they got huge on their series of DVDs back in the day.
Yeah,
Like
I have a couple.
Oh, okay. I feel like most artists at least have a couple back in their stuff. They've got completely digital since with that catalog, but the physical school is still there, and they just train everybody who works on these movies, and they're top notch.
Let me ask you. So you work is your stuff online, or are you in the building when you teach?
No, I'm back in the building. I started in the building, then we had a year or so off from the pandemic, and we migrated online.
Okay.
But they brought everybody back, and it's better that way.
Yeah.
I mean, for my full-time job, trust me, I prefer working at home. But when it comes to the school experience, I feel like it was really important to kind of get back on campus, because half of what you're paying for, I feel like, is the networking. Like
I understand. Yeah, I can see that.
Meeting the people that you're going to be working in this industry with. Like, I mean, at least my own experience, most of the work I ever got was through word of mouth. Yeah. And if it wasn't from my instructors that, I went out of my way to impress and get to know, then it was from my fellow students, and the same, vice versa. Like, I love being able to know a person well enough to recommend them for jobs, like not only seeing how good their work is, but just, I mean, this business, you already know, it's like, you just want to work with people who are cool and like you don't mind dealing with every day, when you see people who are hustling and who are nice, and you're like, oh, I can work with this person on the team on a regular basis, and all you need to do is give that advice to somebody who's looking for someone. It's like, hey, do you know an animator? Do you know a lighter, or this person or that person? And you're like, yeah, I know this person. They're great. Their portfolio's good, and they're just nice to have around. And when you get that thank you from that person, it's like, thank you for sending that person my way. Like, that's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, no, it is. When I taught college for almost 20 years. Mm-hmm. I started in 2001, probably stopped around 2018, so almost 20 years, not fully, 17, 18 years I did it for, probably 2018, 2019. And I taught at both physical campuses and online schools. And you know what? I have to agree with you. The majority of I got my first job in school in my mm-hmm. first semester when I went for my associates at Westchester Community College. But all my other jobs came from networking. You're right. I always told my students, the people sitting next to you in the classroom, don't be jerks to them. They're the ones. Not only they may be your competition and the job interview, but they're also going to be the people who would be like, hey, I know someone who can do this, mm-hmm. and bring a friend in. So it does, word of mouth and networking. I've always got it, but I will say, just my preference, I love working from home.
Oh, for my full-time job, I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world, I teach part-time. I teach 1 day a week. I teach 2 classes on Sunday, and that's fine, gets me out of the house for a day. But, Monday through Friday, I'm right here where I'm sitting, and I love it.
Yeah, no.
I mean, I miss a couple little things about being in the office, but not enough to ever want to go back,
Yeah.
I do miss, just swinging by other departments' desks and seeing what they're doing and seeing what the company's doing as a whole, like on a whim, and there's a little bit of that I miss, but I don't miss commuting. I don't miss, like the office, BS that you deal with just being in an office, like inter-office politics. I just like being in my bubble, working at my own comfort level, and
that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah,
I'm the same. I think it is an artist thing. I mean, listen, most artists I know we're very much introverted. We like to be kind of alone with our own thoughts, our art, and we'll get out when we want to get out and see people. But yeah, no. Actually, what? Speaking of, I'll tell you off the air. Just remind me to tell you.
Okay.
It was something cool you like, but I don't want to Let's take a look at the supernatural stuff, because I am a fan. Well, I gotta say I was a fan. I'm not. I don't go back and really rewatch it these days.
Sure.
No matter how many reruns it is on like TBS or TNT or whatever it is, they put like 4 hours a day on or something. But I thought it was a great concept. I really did. I thought the show was a good concept, but it lasted too long in my opinion.
Yeah.
I remember, I forgot what it was. I was watching it with my wife, and I think we were in season 13 or season 12, and I'm like, they've done everything. All they got to do is fight God now. And then the next season was about God showing. I'm like,
Yeah. I was probably checked out by then too, and I loved the show, but it's 13 seasons at 26 episodes or something like that each season. It's like, come on.
It was hard. It was hard. But these designs are great. I love the look of these right here. Now, was this for an actual game or your own concept for a game?
No, it was my own concept. I'm a big believer that in between work, like I should be making my own projects, So,
absolutely.
I would do these things just for that, just so that I can stay sharp. And so what's not on my website is I actually wrote a game document. So again, this was like a pitchable idea that I had, and I just like making up the mock screens and whatnot. But I got to actually show Eric Kripke, the show's creator, my designs.
Really?
Yeah, I wound up storyboarding the show he did before The Boys. I did the pilot episode of a show called Timeless, and he was the writer on that. And I showed him, and he was like, "Oh, cool." And he was like, "Too bad I don't own it anymore," because I guess he sold the rights. He was like, "Yeah, I got nothing to do with it." They slapped my name on it as the creator, but but it was nice to get his seal of approval at least, and
Hold on, I wanted to check out your X-Men stuff here. This is a cool Cyclops. I really dug his look that you got there. What do we got? Storm. And was this Daredevil popping up?
Yeah. I tried to really get out the box with Daredevil.
Yeah. It's I was just rewatching it's on Disney Plus now, but the Netflix season 1 of Daredevil, I just really enjoyed that show. Oh, yeah. Daredevil was the very first Marvel book I ever bought when I started collecting. So I'm a big fan of him for Marvel. Although I don't really follow him now. But I found this design pretty interesting. I'm like, this is a, like you said, it's out there, but it's out of the box of him. But yeah, no, it was a really cool concept. And here, where is it here? I just really loved this pose you got right there of Cyclops there. But we haven't looked at your storyboarding work, so let's go in here. This is what you do now.
It is.
And these are actual recent work.
Yeah.
So, you have worked on Castle Rock, which I'm not too familiar with that.
Castle Rock was a Stephen King show on Hulu.
Okay.
And it was actually pretty good. They did they basically did an origin story for Misery.
Okay. Oh, I've heard of it then. Yeah, I'm not a Stephen King fan because I'm not like a horror fan. If something's suspense, I'll watch it, but I tend to stay away from. Well, here's the thing. I'm not a horror fan, but I don't want to watch horror that is live action. I will watch it in a cartoon form, or I'll watch it or I'll read it in like a comic or something. But I won't read it in a book. I won't read fiction, horror, anything, because my imagination's too out there. But I don't want to see the stuff real.
Sure. Well,
that's
for live action television, a lot of the work I was getting would be either action or horror, because that's the stuff they really needed to plan out.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it was special effects or pyrotechnics or stuff like that. So that's why I would wind up getting a lot of these types of gigs. So this and American Horror Story, which I did a bunch of work on, was all special effects driven. So and a lot of the stuff, anytime there was fire involved, whether it was going to be CG or practical, they would give me a call. Especially on the horror story stuff, and even shows like Banshee. A lot of the times they called me, something was getting blown up, so they needed to like plan that out.
It's interesting to see the difference in the way you storyboard. Is this what was I going to say? Required by the company use this storyboard format. Like here, we're looking on Castle Rock. We're looking at this, layout, but then we go to which one here was this Alita,
Oh,
and
sure.
now you're looking in this format. So,
Well, I do what I feel serves the project best. So,
okay.
like the Castle Rock thing, let's say more or less there was like 20 boards, give or take a few boards. So I would draw them a little bit bigger and in more detail because in the time allotted, I had some time to show them off. For this was for the Blu-ray of Alita, where they did like 5 motion comic animations.
Okay.
And each one was like 5-6 minutes. And I had to do a bunch of boards in a short amount of time. So I did these on Post-it notes. All of these were done on Post-it notes with nothing but a ballpoint pen and a Sharpie marker.
Wow.
And I put them on the wall, and when they were approved, an intern was nice enough to scan them in. I did a little cleanup and just laid them out as cleanly as possible.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, anecdotally about this project, because it's kind of interesting. As a freelance artist, a lot of times you don't know what you're going to do when you get there, right? Mm-hmm. These projects tend to be top secret. They don't want to tell you until the last minute. So, they just ask your rate and your availability. And if it's agreeable, they say, all right, come on in. We'll tell you when you get here. I get there and they're like, hey, we're going to do something for the Blu-ray of Alita. So we have a cut of the movie. It's unfinished, but we need you to watch it. Right. So it's 10 a.m. They're like, get a cup of coffee. We're going to put you in a room and you're going to watch like a 3.5-hour cut of Alita. Right. I watched the movie. It's pretty cool. And then they're like, okay, now we have this 200-page Word document. It's literally James Cameron's notes on the world of Alita, like his actual world building. Wow. Like he thought of the technology, the city structure, the politics, like the citizens. He had detailed notes on the world. And then they had the scripts. And the scripts are basically just cherry-picked, like his notes, like cherry-picked and constructed into like these 5 vignettes. So I spent a day not even drawing, like just absorbing the world, taking it all in, reading James Cameron's notes, which is a masterclass in world building into itself, And then finally, like maybe in the last hour, I started like iterating some thumbnails. And then I spent about 30 days, I think eventually they only did 5 stories, but I did 6 stories, about 5 minutes long. And I get them all done. And I go in with my art director and a producer. We go to see the head of the studio. Mm-hmm. And I think they're going to do all the talking. I'm just there to answer questions. And the head of the studio says, hey, you know what? Let's look at these boards in the conference room. So me and the art director and producer, we walk out the door. The owner of the company goes his own way. We enter this conference room, and there's this long, like Bruce Wayne style, like dining table, like conference table. Pass the salt, like type of place. And we're on one end, and the owner of the company walks in from his own entrance, and he's on the far end. And basically, they're like, all right, Fred, walk him through it. So I had to I had to stand in front of a big movie screen at the far end of this table and yell at this guy at the far end and pitch these 6 stories. And I'm doing voices, sound effects. I'm trying to impersonate, what's his name from, who's the German dude from this movie, the Inglourious Basterds guy, Christoph Waltz. I'm trying to impersonate him, do his like cadence, and I'm blowing things up. And it took me an hour and 15 minutes without a breath, without a sip of water to like pitch all of these. And then he's like, at the end of it, he's just like, all right, great, let's make them. They hire a bunch of artists to make them beautiful, and they become the thing.
That's hysterical.
Oh. It's pretty fun, just it's part of the storyboarding journey is like being able to sell your boards, being able to pitch them. Right? Yeah. It's not just handing over the pictures and they say okay or you take notes. A lot of times you got to put on a little bit of a song and dance.
Let me ask you, as I scroll through these here, which is there anyone specifically you want me to show of
Sure. Why don't we look at, if you scroll up, let's look at American Horror Story actually a little bit. Yeah.
So this one.
Yeah. So if you actually move forward a little bit, this one was from Hotel.
Oh, it goes this way?
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Right. Now, so something like this,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if anybody's interested in storyboarding who's listening to this, I really, really encourage you guys to like study films, right? Watch movies. Just watch as many movies as possible. This was an episode of American Horror Story Freakshow, which is the season I did the most work on, and it was literally about circus freaks. And it was a homage to the old 1920s movie Freaks. And I had seen bits and clips of it, but I had to like kind of do a shot-for-shot recreation, and I had to watch that movie. And a lot of times, you know, the language that we speak is movies. You know, people say, hey, like this director, like this movie, and we need to be able to, you know, kind of either go right away and watch that movie, or, you know, hopefully from our own recollection, you know, kind of do that stuff. But I highly, highly encourage people to do film studies, copy shots from movies, you know, just try to understand them and get outside your wheelhouse. Like, you might like horror or comedy or superhero movies or whatever, but start watching other things. Watch samurai movies from the 60s, French New Wave, you know, just foreign movies in general, and see what other people are doing. Because if you're becoming a storyteller of any kind, whether it's storyboarding, comic books, or animation or whatever, like, you don't want to copy the copy, right? You want to kind of study the masters, right? Any illustrator, any artist should be doing this. You know, if you like whatever popular comic book artist who's out there now or animator, find out who they studied from, right? And then make your own decisions based on that, right? So that you can go to the source and become your own version of that thing, because that's how we avoid becoming derivative, you know? When you see the same thing happen over and over again, why, you know, people tend to think a certain type of genre becomes boring after a while, is because they're just copying the same thing instead of going back and experimenting and playing with different things, you know? And usually the ones that stand out, that you know, are all of a sudden like, oh wow, they took this, you know, this niche thing that I would have never thought and mixed it with this genre, and now we have a new blend, you know. And the more that you do that kind of stuff, like even like the new Batman, you know, the Matt Reeves Batman, right? He references a movie a lot called Clute from the 70s with like Donald Sutherland and Jane Fonda. And it's a little murder mystery, and if you watch it, you know, it has nothing to do with superheroes or the Riddler or anything like that, but you're like, whoa, the Batman's written all over this thing, you know? And it's like, okay, you know, if you go back and watch old 70s cop dramas, and, you know, all of a sudden you take a Serpico and you mix it with, you know, The Boys, you know, I'm just throwing random things out there, and you marry the two, and all of a sudden you got this great new thing. So anyway, the reason I bring you to this, and you can scroll a couple frames, is this was one of the first times I was asked specifically to emulate a movie. But David Fincher gets brought up a lot, you know, Kurosawa these days, or whoever. But you know, all artists really should, I feel like, study film, read books, you know, and not just do the thing that you saw yesterday. Find out what they're doing, you know, who they learned from, and go to the source. Yeah.
You're saying it's funny because you're saying everything I've told my students in the past. I love it. It doesn't matter what, like going to comics. I'm like, you know, you look at someone like Jim Lee. Well, why aren't you looking at like Hal Foster or Alex Raymond, people he was looking at? You know, and because my introduction to comics was strips, and I think that's most of us, you know, who grew up in our era. You know, your uncle influenced my uncle. I used to hang out with him. We'd read the newspaper strip, the Daily News together, like the comics, and we'd draw the Phantom and all those characters and whatnot. But yeah, it's go. You know, I always say go to who was who the masters are, man. Those, you know, in the industry. But I've always said, you know, make sure you're out of your comfort zone. Make sure you're watching films. We are a culture of storytellers. That's it. That's how we communicate, is through storytelling. And it's we all do it. You just, some do it better than others, and some get paid to do it. You know, sure. So it's great.
But it's something you can improve on too. You know, when you draw, I know we touched on this earlier, you know, like I asked you about voice and stuff like that, but do you do it when you draw or do you hum the music?
Oh my
You
God,
know?
when I'm drawing, I literally rewrite my scripts constantly.
Yeah,
I'll have a
yeah,
script I wrote, and now I'll be like, I'm saying, and I'm having the conversation.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I'll do
yeah.
things. I'll make the sound effects. I do it all when I'm drawing.
And doesn't it elevate your drawings, the acting, the poses, like
Yeah,
the energy, right? I tell my students, I go, if you're not making noises when you draw, you're doing it wrong.
yeah,
You know?
exactly. When I first met my wife and she watched me draw for like the first few times, she thought I was the strangest person on the planet. She she was like, "What are you doing? Can you be quiet?" I'm like, "No, I'm drawing." You know, it's,
I was working on a video game. It was announced. It's called Judas. It's from the makers of BioShock, and
okay.
it was the first time I was asked to draw in first person, like
Mm.
you know, like a video game. And I bought a head mount for my iPhone, so I'm walking around my apartment with this thing strapped to my head, and I'm doing all this weird stuff around the apartment. My girl's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm defusing a bomb. Leave me alone." And I'm just like tinkering with the picture frame on the wall, you know.
That's hysterical. I just wanted to, because I know you got to go soon.
Sure.
I wanted to switch over to your Instagram account
Yeah.
so people could first of all go over here. Excuse me. And follow you. It's how do you
Gago,
pronounce
it's Gagoism. So my
Gagoism?
name is Gago, and ism is the way of, right? So it's the way of Gago, Gagoism.
Gagoism. Now I gotta say, you know, something like this that caught my eye, where I'm like, I really, you know, Mechanic. How do you not love him? You know, but it was this type of stuff. When I saw your you know your Tila and Triclops here, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, you're a He-Man dude. This guy does some really cool work. And then I started exploring, and there's a couple of things I just want to touch upon. Your Marvel characters playing basketball here. Now, I'm not a sports fan, but when I
Yeah.
played sports as a kid, basketball was a game I loved. So
Okay.
seeing Marvel characters playing basketball just cracked me up. You know, your Apocalypse. I mean, it's just great. And then you have these comics that,
Sure.
you know, you talk about. But then, where was it that I saw it? There was Conan. I am a huge Conan fantasy guy. I love, you know, sci-fi and fantasy are my genres,
Mm-hmm.
but like, I, Conan. I just love Conan. I
Me
mean,
too.
oh, it's fantastic, and it's funny because I'm also a big fan of pulp stories, pulp comic, or even not even the comics, but the pulps before they were comics. You know, looking at Doc Savage and
Yeah.
you know even Zorro and all these things, right? But Conan was a pulp story. Not many people know this. Everyone thinks it was there were books, but there were comics and there were the Schwarzenegger films and stuff, but he was a pulp hero, and it wasn't until like Frazetta started painting him this way that we got him in this really great like fantasy feel, this barbarian. And I'm like, man, anytime I see a great Conan piece, I get excited. This really nice
Glad.
barbarian. This and is this traditional or is this digital?
No, it's digital.
Digital. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you got a nice watercolor brush going on here, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I have a couple nice pencils and traditional media style brushes,
Yeah.
but these days I don't have room to store traditional media. You know, it's just I love Photoshop.
Listen, I'm digital. I mean, I sketch on paper, and then I
that's
like airdrop it over to either my iPad or my Mac, and I'm either in Photoshop, Clip Studio Paint, or Procreate, and I'm just doing it that way. You know, I always end digital now. I have little loose drawings all over the place of this stuff. But this is just gorgeous stuff. But can you tell us just quickly a little bit about what you're doing here? You have this personal Superman project going on, and I mean, was the Storyboard Pro you're working in, or
Yes, yeah,
okay.
exactly right.
Okay, tell us a little bit because you're bringing, and I'm just going to say because the stuff you were mentioning about Superman, loving the Super Friends, getting into Kurt Swan, looking at the Ruby Spears, I'm seeing these influences in them now that you're talking about, and I just want to go to a specific one if I remember correctly. Was it this one here? I don't remember. Yeah, I just kind of liked like an old Ruby Spears type of piece. But yeah, go ahead, talk about this. What are you doing with this?
Well, as another side project, basically, me and a friend of mine, we always had this conversation about why isn't there a good Superman game? You know, like they have plenty of Batman and Spider-Man games, and we kept talking about it for years. What would be in a good Superman game? And finally, I'm at that place where I'm like, you know, instead of waiting for somebody to make it, and trust me, I have by no means I'm going to make a full-fledged game, but I figured I'm in the business of storyboarding video game cinematics. What would the first 10 minutes of a Superman animatic look like to me?
Yeah.
So I wanted to, what I post mostly is these, you know, big action shots because, you know, that's what people like to see. Yeah. But my perfect version of a Superman game would actually start with Clark Kent being affable, being goofy, you know, playing the part, you know, and then saving people without revealing himself, you know, kind of using his superpowers in sly ways so that, you know, you do that until finally, you know, all hell breaks loose and he has to, you know, pull out the costume and deal with things that are just way out of hand, you know. So at first he's saving civilians from some debris, but then it's quickly meteor showers, then it's Brainiac, then it's Lobo, you know, and then he gets knocked to another planet, and then it's like, you know, while he's knocked unconscious, he has like a flashback of Pa Kent back on the farm, you know, and it's just like, you know, hey son, you know, you took a rough spill there, time to get up type of deal, you know, and then you know make you cry for a second, and then it's Superman the game, you know, and then so it's probably one of my more ambitious projects. I did a Spider-Man one last year.
Which I saw as I scrolled. This is. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking for a specific picture. I just love this picture of Clark. Thanks. But continue with what you're saying.
Yeah. So I did a 5-minute fight scene with Spider-Man versus Kraven.
Yeah.
And because again, in this one, I'm a fan of both characters, and I was watching the old '90s animated series, and I saw them fight, like, you know, the way they introduced Kraven. I was like, oh, it's kind of weak, you know, like how would I do it if James Cameron made his version in the '90s, you know, but mixed with some modern sensibilities, you know. So I got really ambitious with that, and I did this like, you know, 5-minute fight scene. There's some stills from it there. I was basing it from that episode, but I redesigned them. If you scroll down a little bit, maybe actually,
well, right here shows it.
I really tweaked this proportion. What's funny is, coincidentally, that we're talking today about this is that they released the Spider-Man 2 trailer. Sony did their big conference today, and Kraven is the big villain in the new game, and his proportions are very similar to what I drew. So I'm kind of happy that you know, at least we're in the same lane. But anyway, you know, so that was ambitious for me to do the 5 minutes just on my own on that fight scene, and now my current iteration of Superman is at 7 minutes, and I think it's going to be 15 by the time I'm done with it.
Oh yeah! Wow. Listen, I'd love to see that when it's done.
Thanks. This is the stuff that keeps me sharp from my day job. You know, like I get to practice like this. I got to use Blender for the first time, and I was setting up my cameras. And if for people who don't know, Blender is a free 3D program that anybody can download. I'm teaching it to myself
right now, actually.
Ah, great, man! It'll be a really valuable tool.
Yeah. Oh, here's the thing. I hate backgrounds. I hate environment. I'm more of a character guy. So instead of dealing with perspective and stuff, I'm like, let me just build a few sets, and then I can rotate the camera any way I want, take a still shot, drop it into the panel, and I could trace.
That's exactly what I do. I learned to gray box enough stuff that I can build basic sets. And if I need a hero model, I'll buy the cheapest version that I can get, you know, like if I need like a detailed train or something, I'll spend $10-20 at most, you know. And I think the cityscape was free for that Spider-Man thing. And I just bought a $10 hero building for the place that they actually fight on. Nice. And most of the assets were free. I mean, you know, I paid for the Adobe suite, so I had a little bit of After Effects and stuff, but Yeah. So I'm always trying to learn new stuff. Even now, I'm looking into storyboarding in Unreal. Unreal's another free software, and whatever keeps me relevant. Like that's the other thing. I always tell people we're like doctors. Like a doctor has to go to conferences and learn new techniques all the time if they want to stay relevant. You don't want a doctor performing the same medical techniques they learned in the 1960s, right? Like, there are advances in medical technology. Well, there are advances in art too. Even though the basics are tried and true, we need to stay on top of our game if we want to stay hireable and relevant.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I know we got to get going. I know you said you can only really do an hour, a little over. And I don't want to keep you, but I wanted to just comment on this. I love that you made this a shadow box. I have the same book and tape in my closet.
Yes.
This was actually given to me for a friend. It was his as a kid, and he's like, and I don't know, we had to be going, oh man, over 20 years now. And he came over my house to help me with something. He's like, here, I go, I thought you'd like this. And I'm like, what is this? And I look at him, I'm like, oh my God. And I don't know how many times I played the tape just to listen to it. Within the first week, I played it to go to bed with. I'm like, I just want to hear the story.
Yeah. It's so orchestral too, right? Like the music's really grand. That book is the reason I think I fell in love with Batman as a kid. I had that book since I was a little kid, and in like a 2-page spread, they show him training. Like they do the origin pretty fast,
Yeah.
And they show Batman just perfecting his body over a few panels, and his mind. He's like a scientist in a little splash, and he's a gymnast, and he's this and that, and it was always that stuck in my mind the most. Batman's cool, his costume and his fighting prowess and all that stuff, but the idea that this person could will himself into like physical and mental perfection always stuck with me as a kid. And in this book, it was just really well drawn and laid out clearly, and it just burned into my brain.
Yeah. No. I gotta say, my book that really made me like. I say I'm not a Batman, but I don't want to lie. I'm not. He's not my favorite, but I like the character. And the book that got me was The Untold Legend of Batman.
Yeah, I have that too.
I love that because you saw him as a little kid. He was the first Robin. You like learn all this stuff about him. Like, I know everything about Batman. Like, it was like, this was great. I don't remember when I got that book. I know I was in my early teens. And I loved it. I believe I have it back there. I don't know. Whatever year it came out, it's sitting on my pile
I
of
recently
books.
moved, so I have it in a box, but I know where it's at. Like, it's accessible.
Yeah.
But I'll digress for just a second too, just to speak on, because I can talk about my love of Batman all day. But there's a script, an unproduced script in the '80s. I think his name is like Tom Mankiewicz. He was a script doctor on the original Superman movie, and he wrote a Batman movie that was supposed to star Peter O'Toole as the Joker and Bill Murray as Batman.
Wow.
And it was very much in the vein of the Superman movies. Like, Bruce was a young genius, and he was making those holograms that Lex Luthor had in the Superman movies in the first two Christopher Reeve ones. And anyway, the parents die, and he's training himself, and there's this scene that stuck with me. Bruce Wayne is running up the side of a mountain, young Bruce Wayne. He's like 12 or something. And he's running with an adult tutor who's like getting winded, like teaching him like French. And he hits a certain mile marker, and the tutors switch out, and the tutor starts teaching him another subject, starts teaching him like math, while they're still running. Like, Bruce doesn't break stride. Like, the tutor has to basically pass the baton to the next tutor. And Bruce is like, and it was another example of this young person training themselves in a way that I've never seen before. And I wish that would be conveyed in some medium, some live action or animated medium. Because they always gloss over that stuff. They just go right to ninja school,
Yeah.
And the idea that, he was a chemist and he was fluent in so many languages and this, that, and the other. And that's the stuff behind the scenes that we don't see enough of. But,
No. Listen, I'll just say this. I know, what's his name? Gunn is now in charge of well, him and the other guy, which no one ever remembers his name, I guess, right now. But
Safran? Peter
yeah,
Safran?
yeah, something. I'm sorry, I always forget. But and Gunn says he's doing the Superman movie. Now, I'm a big Superman fan. I don't know. Let me see if
Are you worried?
I'm very worried.
Okay.
For a few reasons. One, I'm not a huge James Gunn fan. I find that sometimes he goes more for humor than story.
Mhm.
At least in what I've seen in his superhero films.
Mm.
That I don't want that to happen. I'm waiting for a good Superman movie.
Yeah.
And I've always said we've never really seen it in live action or even animation, but the early days of Clark. You know, not like Smallville or anything, but like him learning to be a reporter, him learning to be a hero, you know, like there was, I forget what the book was, but there was a book that kind of explored it. And I'm kind of
hoping the Max Landis book, like American Alien or something like that.
I don't remember it, but I'm hoping that a lot of what James does for this movie, they at least pull at least maybe 15, 20 minutes of that information in there. I'm tired of, look, he's from another planet. We all know it. We all know his story. He's another planet, and he's going to fight Lex. Mongol's one of my favorite super villains.
Hey, I'm a big Mongol fan. If they do that, I'd be really happy.
That's what, but I know they're not going to do it, but I'd like to see, something happen. Whether it's like Lobo, like you had, like that DC animated film. I forget which one it was. Was it Man of Tomorrow or something? It was kind of a.
Oh yeah. That one was okay. I like the animation, the fight sequence. The story was okay.
Yeah, but they brought Lobo into it, so
yes.
I was like, if they do something like that, I'll be okay with it. But yeah, so.
I love Superman almost as much as I love Batman. I just finished watching the most recent episode of Superman and Lois.
I just saw that today too.
And I like that show overall. It's a really sad, sappy season, but I still enjoy it a lot.
It's the last season unless it gets picked up.
Yeah. And I liked Krypton before that, which I didn't think I was going to like.
Yeah.
On Sci-Fi, but surprisingly, it was pretty well told, and I love their version of Brainiac and Doomsday, and even Lobo was rendered well.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. But I will say this: I maybe it's just me being the classic Superman fan, or I miss a Superman who smiles.
Yeah,
it's listen. How do you say his name? Hoechlin, the guy who's playing. Tyler Hoechlin. He's doing a great job. I'm not going to say he's bad. He's doing a great job. But, and he does smile, but, occasionally he is brooding Superman. But give him a clean shave. He doesn't need to have stubble and look tough all the time.
That's for the ladies.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying it's looking at Dean Cain was the last one that was like live action smiling.
Yeah, but that show was not.
Compared to what they could do, compared to what they do today,
it doesn't hold up very well. Aesthetically. They both of them had great chemistry. Terry Hatcher and they look great. But those, I guess, because they just couldn't do the stories well. They always kind of danced around.
And I will say I was rewatching it a little bit ago, like a month or two ago, and there are scenes where Clark or Superman is getting ready to fly off, and you see how his cape is velcroed to his like. There's just little things that they don't. And this new one, I believe it's Velcro too. I think I saw it behind the scenes. I think it's kind of Velcroed on, because if you look at him from the back, there's like this V shape that connects to the cape. I think the bottom is like Velcroed or stuck in, and then it's Velcroed there to hold it down or something. I forget how. There was a behind the scenes I saw, and I'm like, wow, wait a second, that's how they do it.
It's probably a lot of the same physical techniques. It's just the CG can cover up a lot more.
Exactly. Anyway, man, I should let you get going. I know it's.
This is fun though.
Yeah, no, it was a great time. Can you hang out backstage for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Let me just do my wrap up. I want to thank you for coming on.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
I had a lot of fun chatting. You're definitely welcome back anytime. I'd love to talk more about any comics, anything like that.
Anytime.
Man. So, but yeah, let me drop you backstage. I'll be there in a moment.
Sounds
all
good.
right. Thanks again. All right. So everyone, thank you all who watched tonight or who's going to watch in the future. Everybody, this was a very fun talk tonight. I really enjoyed talking with Fred. Remember, go check out his Instagram. It is Gagoism. So GAGOISM. Just look that up on Instagram. Totally follow him. He's got some really great work. Next week, I got another special guest returning. I believe it's his third time on the show. We're going to be talking to Chris Hart. He has a new cartooning book out. So we are going to be chatting with him. Excuse me, guys. I will see you all next week. You have a great rest of your day and, week or whenever you're watching. And I'll see you later.